Hello YouTube, I'm still working on the anti-rationalist video. I wanted to reread The Structure of Scientific Revolutions before I got to that one. I'm shooting for next Friday when I'll upload that one. But this video seemed like a topic that was a little more immediate. So what I think is obvious from what is happening with, like, say, the Lacey Green situation, as well as Thunderfoot having the falling out with Sargon and what's going on that side, is that the feminism wars are coming to an end. Now, what I mean by that is, when I first came to YouTube in 2013, that was around the time that the community had completed a shift from arguing about religion to arguing about feminism. The video that finally made me start posting videos was Thunderfoot's video, Teach Them Not to Rape. I was so appalled that a grown adult, let alone one with a PhD, could make a video with these arguments in it, that I wanted to respond to it. But there were tons and tons of response videos to it. And so initially what I was thinking was, well, if everyone's responding to this video, there's no point in me doing it. I've never made a video before. Who's going to care? But I found that nobody was really doing a point by point. Usually they would grab onto something in the video and just rebut that one point or a few points here and there. And I thought that video needed like a complete point by point breakdown of why it was so stupid. So that's how I ended up on YouTube to begin with. Even 2 years later, when I ended up deleting my channel, the video was one of my most popular videos. I initially started making videos about other topics, usually about philosophy or religion. Feminism kept finding its way back in, which I don't really think it's wrong to talk about feminism, but it was not what I wanted the focus to be. So I decided to do a 5-part series about feminism, so then I could just move on to other topics. I do that series. The first part of that series ends up being my most watched video by far for a long time. And because this conversation about feminism just continues and the anti-feminists keep saying crazy things and attacking feminists all the time, I felt a moral obligation on one hand. And I also wanted to please my audience who wanted me to talk about feminism all the time. So I just kept getting pulled back. When I finally ended up deleting that channel in 2015, my top 10 videos, 9 of them were about feminism. One of them was about Ayn Rand's The Virtue of Selfishness. But all the other 9 were about feminism. It got
unhealthy, okay? Like, I was obsessing
over every word that came out of my mouth.
Every way I could be misconstrued or accidentally cause harm, no matter what. People exaggerating.
Spreading lies and rumors. So at that point I was burnt out. And then huge drama happened and I ended up deleting my channel. And here's the thing. I just feel done with the hypocrisy I see after the recent Lacey Green video where she talks about gender. There was all this outrage from certain male feminists. So I was going to do a video where I talked about MRAs, but instead of using clips of MRAs, I was going to use male feminists. I was even going to throw Big Lundi in there.
Personally, I hate talking about feminism because feminism, to me, is divided into sects. There's rad feminism and then there's feminism. And some of the feminists that I listen to say, well, while the rad feminists are a little crazy, some of them do have some pretty good points. Well, I was just sent a blog article by Womble. Angry Womble, who plans, of course, to make a blog post about this, and when she does, I'll go ahead and make a little link down here for you all to see.
It was going to be a pretty straightforward satire. But then I found the anti-feminists already did it for me.
If you don't know Dick, he's a fairly stereotypical male feminist. He's kind of angry, and he really, really doesn't like it when women talk out of turn.
This is just me letting off some steam, really, and I know a lot of people are going to think maybe I'm sounding a little bit harsh in this video, but I don't care. Because I'm just at a point now where I'm done trying to be I've tried doing the conversation thing, I've tried to make my point. I've tried to make the arguments. I've tried all that, and it seems to be falling on deaf ears. This is a message simply to Lacey Green, who's been going off on Twitter earlier today. This is all I've got to say to you, Lacey. Shut up.
That's right. Don't let that bitch talk to you that way. Chrisiosity brought this to my attention inadvertently with this tweet. Thanks for being the right kind of asshole. Yeah, the kind that tells women to shut up because they haven't listened to you. That's the right kind of asshole to a feminist. The fuck? Wait. Thanks for being the right kind of asshole. Yeah, that's what she fucking said.
So I gotta tell you, Steve's extreme reaction here really confused me. Like, why is it that when Eli Bosnick wants to have conversations with the other side, Steve's glad that there's people like Eli who make more of an effort to reach out and project more empathy?
I'm glad that there are also people like you who make more of an effort to reach out and be more sort of to project more empathy.
But when Lacey Green wants to have conversations with the other side, it's disgusting and disappointing, and she should be fucking ashamed of herself.
It's disgusting and disappointing, and she should be fucking ashamed of herself.
And then I thought, oh, hang on, maybe he's kissing Eli's ass because Eli's a super popular podcaster with an audience of like 500,000 or something. But then I thought, hang on, Lacey's a super popular YouTuber with an audience of like 1.5 million or something. That can't be it. And the only other difference I can think of is that Eli's a man and Lacey's a woman. But that can't be it, because that would mean that Steve's sexist.
But I plan to record a different video today, and then I saw Kevin Logan's response yesterday, and I have to say, it was one of the worst examples of quote mining I think I've ever seen in all my time on YouTube. It's probably one of the most egregious things to happen to mining in the United Kingdom since Arthur Scargill left office. I tell you what I'll do, just on the off chance you haven't seen Lacey Green's video on gender, let me play you the relevant part. I'll speed it up a little bit, right, so you don't have to sit through the whole thing, and then I'll show you what Kevin did to it.
And I think that this is one of the problems in this conversation is that the same word is being used to refer to like a million things. Gender sometimes refers to sex. How many genders? Basically two. Gender sometimes refers to society's gender roles. How many? Basically two. Gender sometimes refers to someone's outward gender expression. How many? Potentially infinite. Gender sometimes refers to individual gender identities. How many? Potentially infinite. And gender sometimes refers to labels and pronouns. It's language. How many? Again, potentially infinite.
Okay, so if you hadn't watched that before, what she's effectively saying is that some of our conversations around gender are being confounded because people are referring to different things. And she gives two examples first off the bat where people use the word gender to refer to something which is binary, and then she gives three more examples where people are using gender to refer to things in such a way that gender is not binary, that effectively it fills out, I suppose you could say, it's more of an analog, and it's filling out a kind of colour space in which there's potentially kind of infinite number of variations. She then goes on to make the case after that as to why she favours the latter rather than the former, and then sums it up just in case there's any fucking ambiguity about that whatsoever. She then sums it up with this sentence.
And I think we have to look at all of that. That is, in a nutshell, why I think there is more to gender than just biology.
You see, I don't think there's any way that she could make that any fucking clearer. This idea that gender is akin to biological sex and therefore is a binary, she's made it abundantly clear that that is not her position. Unless you're like high on LSD or unless you're smashed out your face on cheap fucking cider that you've stolen off the tramp that lives down the street.
Gonna be fucking sick.
I don't know how you could watch her video and walk away from it drawing any other conclusion that the gender equals binary position is not the position that she holds, is not the position that she is trying to sell to the people that are watching her video. But this was the response that Kevin Logan made. Put your fucking mining helmets on, because this is a fucking corker.
And subjective, attitudes, feelings, behaviors, like what does that even mean? And I think that this is one of the problems in this conversation is that the same word is being used to refer to like a million things. Gender sometimes refers to sex. How many genders? Basically two. Gender sometimes refers to society's gender roles. How many? Basically two.
There are basically two genders. She's parroting the same fucking shit that these fucking assholes want to hear.
Ah, fucking hell. I don't really think I need to say anything about that. I mean, that is just so fucking cringingly obvious.
Obviously, both Kevin Logan and Dick Coughlin realized how utterly ridiculous their videos were because they removed them. Without an apology or a retraction, by the way, which is a pretty cowardly thing to do. Then there was the double standard of there being outright outrage at Lacey Green being seen hugging Sargon of Akkad in this picture, but ContraPoints posts these pictures of him with shoe on head and Armored Skeptic, and I see the same people calling for Lacey's blood retweeting them. Now, some people will say they aren't as bad as Sargon, and in a few respects I agree, but Sargon's never defended pedophilia as a side kink, as Shoe on Head has. Steve Shives has said Shoe on Head is a completely unacceptable person to talk to because he says she's a rape apologist, which is somewhat true. So, why isn't there any criticism directed at ContraPoints whatsoever? Not that I think he deserves it. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy. And when I previously argued there was a double standard toward actual feminists who are women and male feminists who are basically glory hounds trying to hijack a conversation about women, some people said they agreed with this basic point but disagreed that it applied to what was happening with Lacey Green. And I found that claim to be dubious a couple weeks ago, and now I find it more so. It just, the longer it goes on, the more obvious it seems. In addition to this, people kept basically giving me gossip about Lacey and her doing this for book sales. Now, even if this were true, this is a disaster thing to do for book sales. What she has done is alienate her target audience in order to appeal to an audience not known for their love of books. And I don't even know if she has a book deal. I can't find any third-party verification, so people are just telling me she has this book deal. And she's doing this because she has this book deal. But I have no way of knowing that. Something else people are talking about is how Anita Sarkeesian reacted to Sargon sitting in the front row of her panel about harassment. And Anita herself wrote about this, so I guess I'll just read a portion of what she wrote. Quote, "When you have a history of harassing someone for years, and you show up in the front row of their panel with a camera and an entourage, that is not an act of good faith, to put it mildly. That is itself an act of harassment and intimidation. He and his companions were doing this not just to me, but to other women as well. Women like Kat Black and Francesca Ramsey. So that we all are aware at VidCon that this man who has harassed us and whose hundreds and thousands of followers have attacked us online for years is here, watching us. It's a deliberate act to create an environment that feels hostile, to communicate to us that if and when we dare to show up in public to express the ideas that we express online, the harassment will follow us into the physical world as well." So, I completely agree with that. This is like kind of thing that stalkers and abusers do. They will show up. That's why restraining orders exist. They will show up at a place and not do anything just to freak the person out. And then if the person gets them kicked out or asks them to leave or whatever, they can play the victim. This is actually something my stepfather used to do to my mother. So I'm well aware of it. A friend of mine was stalked by an ex-boyfriend for a long time, and he used to do the same thing. And I think like Anita acting the way she did actually helps Sargon play the victim, but she was reacting in real time. So if someone's going to make the argument to me that Lacey's actions help Sargon, I already saw him spinning it to his advantage to try to make himself seem reasonable and a good person. So I don't doubt that that's what he did. Anita's actions do the same thing. It's very hard to do anything that these people can't spin in their own advantage. Now, if Anita knew he was going to show up in advance, she could have possibly have called him out in a way that was not to his advantage, like point out that he's there and not be quite as combative as she was. It's a game. And I think a lot of people are doing this because if we stop talking about feminism, a lot of these channels don't have anything else to talk about. And people even told me on my old channel that this would happen, that one day it would happen, that feminism as a topic would just die. And this is the beginning of that. I was very frustrated with the conversation on YouTube and this topic in particular when I was at the end of my old channel. In particular, I was sick of the male feminists, but I didn't start saying that men couldn't be feminists until after I deleted my old channel, which people took it as just being me being controversial for the point, the purpose of being controversial and just sour grapes and things like that. But it was something that I believed before. I just didn't feel I could say it in this community. When I deleted my old channel, I felt free to actually say the things I believed. I had 3 hangouts on my old channel where I was the only man present, because at that point there were no hangouts or anything talking about feminism that consisted of just women. And some people even like in the comments were like, well, you're moderating it, so there's still a man present. I was like, yes, that's true, but I have a bigger channel than most of the people who came, so I had a larger microphone to allow these women to speak. And people also complained about the topics of those hangouts. But in the second hangout, there was actually a point where everyone was talking. I literally just got up, went to my kitchen, made a sandwich, came back, and nobody even realized I was gone. So that's how much women had taken over the conversation in that second hangout. So that's what I wanted. That's why I was really frustrated. There's an episode of Portlandia, which Jenny Kiss used in one of her videos as well, and called Doug Becomes a Feminist, which really mocks male feminists really well and shows you why they're absurd clowns for the most part. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, I would just suggest watch that episode of Portlandia. The other group of feminists who I think actually make it difficult to talk online, I describe them as online feminists, which I then define in a certain way, because they're ubiquitous online. They're liberal, sex positive feminists. Most of them are really young. I once described them as just college kids who read a book about feminism one time and decided they were an expert. They really bothered me too. The problem with them is they believe that their brand of feminism is the true feminism, and it's really a competition of who is the most inclusive, who is the most liberal. But they ignore class. As Katie Halper said one time, a good hint that somebody is not an intersectional feminist is that they need to tell you constantly that they're an intersectional feminist, because they ignore class completely, which tended to be my problem with the recent presidential election and the primary and all that stuff. Is it was talking about feminism while ignoring class, as if that had nothing to do with it. A very bizarre conversation to be having. They have a series of dogmas, and they exclude radical feminists. They exclude socialist and Marxist feminists from their conversation, who are the ones who I think have the more interesting things to say. It's not just dogmas. And another show, which I recently watched on Netflix, makes fun of those kind of feminists, which is The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. I recently watched some of the third season, not all the way through it, but there's an episode called Kimmy Becomes a Feminist. And if you're not familiar with that show, the show's about a woman who lived in a bunker for some years because she was kidnapped as a teenager by this dispensationalist preacher. Kidnapped her and some other women, and they lived in a bunker underground because he said the world was going to end. An apt subject for a light comedy. But it's an inherently feminist show if you watch it in terms of its themes. But they mocked these kinds of feminists because in the third season she decides to go to college and she encounters these types of feminists. And my favorite joke in that episode is she's going to this party and she's putting on this dress and she says, "I look like a hooker in this dress." And one of the girls says, "They're called sex workers and they're heroes." That's my favorite joke of that episode. But like they make fun of those feminists as well as the Portlandia episode does, and at the end she realizes these kids are much younger than her, and she realizes they don't really know anything. They're babies. They just have this education and they know these academic terms, and they don't really know anything. That is in a nutshell what I meant when I said I hate these online feminists. Is what it was, because they're excluding the radical feminists who usually know what they're talking about. Even if I disagree with them, they usually have complex ideas. They're excluding these more left socialist Marxist feminists who, once again, usually have an idea what they're talking about because they have these ridiculous dogmas that they read in a book or in college and they took completely without self-reflection. That's my issue. And I have friends who would describe themselves as liberal, sex-positive feminists who I think are self-reflective and who do think these things through. But the majority of what I see online are just these young feminists who just have these dogmas. And you can't question them. And if you question them, you're a bigot. So what I hope to do with my channel is move on. I will address some topics having to do with feminism for the rest of this month, or the rest of July. Until the end of July. I'm going on vacation on the 26th of July, so basically a month from now. But until then, there are some videos that I want to do, including a video about gender, my views on gender. I'll do. But after that, I'm going to move on to completely different topics that I've never addressed before, and other topics I have address them in a different way. Doesn't mean I'll never, ever, ever talk about feminism and what other people are talking about. It's like it's not going to be feminism is going to be the subject of every other video anymore. I'm done with that.
Hey everyone, thought this was probably better suited for a short video rather than a stream of tweets. I know a lot of you saw a picture that Carl, aka Sargon, posted last night. You may or may not have noticed that in the picture I look like a fucking hot mess. And that's because I was. That picture was taken after about 15 minutes of crying and hugging and talking in the street, on a street corner with Carl. And I know people have a lot of strong feelings about Carl. People are aware of how he has treated me in the past. And for me, like in the whole anti-scene, all these communities, I would say that Carl is the person that has contributed the most to my very human pain. I think that, mistakes were made. And last night, we finally talked about them in person, and it was a really powerful, intense night for me, because this is something that I've held on to. Some of the things that he said about me, the way that he's treated me, have been really hurtful. And last night, he held me and apologized, told me, why he was sorry, demonstrated a real understanding of the pain that he had caused me, and a willingness to stop doing that kind of shit. And for me, it meant a lot. And, I'm working on repairing my relationship with him, having a relationship with him that's more healthy. We're not going to see eye to eye. And, you know, he may do stuff in the future that I disagree with. You know, the fact that he was able to do that in such a genuine, authentic way, and also apologize on Twitter, having, you know, a moment of self-awareness about some of the other pain that he may have caused other people in the community, you know, Anita specifically, I think was a pretty solid good faith gesture. And, you know, that makes me really happy. But more than happy, it makes me feel like I can, oh God, such a baby. It makes me feel like I can heal, forgive, move on. And I don't expect anyone else to feel that way. I'm not, you know, reconciling with Carl as a reconciliation between feminism and the antis. It's a reconciliation between two human beings. It's for me and me alone. And, you know, anyone who's going to freak out about that, it's none of your business how I handle the ways that I've been treated online. It's none of your business, you know, how I go about that and how I try to move forward. For me in my life, forgiveness is very important. It's central to who I am. It's central to how I live my life. It's central to my mental and emotional health and my happiness in this world. And I needed to be able to forgive him. And he finally gave me what I needed to start doing that. And, you know, we still have a lot to talk about. And, you know, a lot of things I'm excited to talk about because we have very different perspectives on things. But yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of context, you know, a little bit of my thoughts on it. And people are already, you know, I received my phone blew up this morning with all of the feminist folks being angry about it. And you know what, they're entitled to their anger. They can feel however they want to feel. But for me right now, this is about my pain and my experience and being able to move on and forgive. That's, you know, me. It's just me.
Lacey, shut up.